Give me a minute, and let me tell you a story. The origins of Memorial Day are deeply rooted in Black American history, though this is often overlooked in mainstream narratives. On May 1st, 1865, just weeks after the Civil War ended, over 10,000 formerly enslaved people in Charleston, South Carolina, held a procession in honor of Union soldiers who died in a Confederate prison camp and were buried in a mass grave. Black residents exhumed the bodies, gave them proper burials, and organized what is widely considered the first large-scale Memorial Day commemoration. The event included prayers, singing, readings, and the laying of flowers, hallmarks of modern observances. This early expression of collective mourning and patriotism was both a tribute to the sacrifice of Black and white Union soldiers and a declaration of Black Americans' rightful place in the national story. Over time, this origin was forgotten or suppressed as Memorial Day evolved into a national holiday, but the contributions of Black Americans continue to resonate through the present day.
The first Memorial Day actually was created by African Americans celebrating their freedom in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. The story was just almost unbelievable when I first read it. On May 1st, 1865, the Civil War had ended, just ended. People gathered on the old Planters horse track, the racetrack in Charleston, and they held this extraordinary parade. In the last 6 to 8 months of the war, the Confederates had converted the infield of that racetrack into an open-air prison, and about 260 Union soldiers had died. On May 1st, about 10,000 people marched around the old Planters race course, led by some 2,000 or 3,000 black children, carrying armloads of roses and flowers and singing John Brown's Body, followed by black women, black men, and then Union troops. And they marched around the course, and then they gathered in this cemetery that had been created by local black workmen, and they heard preaching from 5 black ministers, according to this article. These were the freed people of Charleston paying tribute to the Union dead. That's the first Memorial Day.
Tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence.
Thinking on it like that.
Hey, I'm tripping, I'm sliding, I'm riding through the back like fuck. Bust that on a beat, bro, deep boat in rap. He a freak though, man down, call like Ember Lambs. Tell him breathe, let them boys to the cross, they walk around like T.
American freed slaves actually started decorating the graves of the fallen Civil War soldiers. And in Charleston, South Carolina, they actually started celebrating because Union soldiers who were held captive by the Confederates, they were held in a racetrack because they were captured. 250 of them died, and they were placed in mass graves. And these newly emancipated slaves were disturbed by that. So they actually exhumed bodies, gave them proper burials, decorated their graves, and then held a huge celebration. Over 10,000 people showed up, including 3,000 children. And this celebration is believed to be the first Memorial Day celebration in America.
This Memorial Day, I think it's important to remember that the Confederacy declared war on the U.S., which was and is still illegal, right? It was and is still called treason, and it was and is still punishable by death, right? And let's remember that Memorial Day was a day started by Black people to mark the tremendous sacrifices that Black soldiers and other Union soldiers had made to put the Confederacy back in its place. The day was May 1st, 1865, and Black residents of Charleston, South Carolina went to the plantation racetrack, which was used by the Confederates as a prisoner of war camp, right? 257 soldiers died of disease because they didn't have the proper nourishment, shelter, or sanitation, and they were thrown into unmarked graves. And then Black Charlestonians, now all free, reorganized those graves with rows, and they built a tall fence around them to create a proper cemetery. Then they organized a memorial. It is said that 10,000 people came to this tribute, and that during this memorial they were holding roses and singing this song here, John Brown's Body. So far, that's the earliest Memorial Day celebration that we know of, thanks to David Blight and this book. So enjoy your day, folks. It was really hard one.
Memorial Day's revolutionary origins. What we now know as Memorial Day began as Decoration Day. In the immediate aftermath of the U.S. Civil War, it was a tradition initiated by former slaves to celebrate emancipation and commemorate those who died for the cause. As the U.S. Civil War came to a close in 1865, Union troops entered the city of Charleston, South Carolina, where 4 years prior the war had begun. While residents that looked like me had largely fled the city, Black residents of Charleston remained to celebrate and welcome the troops, who included the 21st Colored Infantry. Their celebration on May 1st, 1865, the first Decoration Day, later became Memorial Day. Over the late 1800s and the early 1900s, in the context of Jim Crow and the complete subordination of Black political participation, the mainstream memory of the Civil War largely became a reflection of the reconciliationist and supremacist stories. The emancipationist version of the Civil War and the heroic participation of African Americans in their own liberation was erased from popular culture, the history books, and official commemoration. The spirit of the first Decoration Day, the struggle for Black liberation and the fight against racism, has unfortunately been whitewashed from the modern Memorial Day. In the statues, anniversary parades, and popular magazines, the Civil War was portrayed as an all affair, a tragic conflict between brothers. To the extent the role of slavery was allowed in these remembrances, Lincoln was typically portrayed as the beneficent liberator standing above the kneeling slave. The mere image of the fighting Black soldier pierced through this particular memory, which in reality was a collective and forced forgetting of the real past. Portraying the rebellious slave or Black soldier would unmask the Civil War as a life and death struggle against slavery, a true social revolution, and a reminder of the political promises that had been betrayed. While historians have gone a long way to expose the supremacist history of the Civil War and uncover its revolutionary content, the spirit of the first Decoration Day, the struggle for Black liberation and the fight against racism, has unfortunately been whitewashed from the modern Memorial Day. Let's use Memorial Day weekend to honor the fallen fighters for justice worldwide, speak plainly about this country's historic crimes, and rededicate ourselves to take on those of the present. You can read and share this full article by visiting liberationnews.org. Solidarity, comrades.
You're learning so many important things, and I'm so proud of you.
A lot of Black people were fighting for their freedom. The image of Black people just sitting around waiting on people to free them, that's an image to keep us submissive.
It was also not economically feasible because of the rebellions that were going on. See, we're not talking about just slavery. They were burning and destroying, and there was true guerrilla warfare going on.
Ending slavery was not the reason a civil war was fought at all. The Civil War was fought to bring the South back into unison with the North, and to destroy the economic advantage that the South had due to slavery. They cared nothing about the lives of Black people. They cared nothing about the way that we were treated. They cared nothing about African life. It was not about protecting us because they had somehow waken up and realized that we were human beings too. No, the South was growing too powerful.
Capitalism started to rise. Well, what began to happen is that in capitalism rising, it began to stifle capitalism, because capitalism demands, as an economic system, that people are always trying to rise to the higher. They're competing. But that's going to stifle capitalism, because what's going to happen is there's going to be no competition, because what European is going to compete for a job that they could buy an African to do? So the North said, look, enslavement of African people is stifling capitalism. So the South said, so what you want me to do? They said, well, you got to free your Africans. They free my Africans.
So that bothered Europeans, and they set up agreements, okay, with those who had industries and those who had stores, that you could only hire someone who was white who belonged to a particular laborers union. In fact, some of the first unions were started right here in Pennsylvania. And a lot of black people fail to realize the origin of the union. The union is nothing but a collective force of white people who are protecting jobs for themselves and keeping them away from black.
African Americans built this nation. You built this nation. You know, you're just starting to get real credit for that. Okay, I don't know if you know that. You're just starting to get, you built the nation. We all built it, but you were such a massive part of it. Bigger than you were given credit for. Does that make sense? Right? But through generations of blood, sweat, and tears, and you deserve a government that defends your interests, protects your families, and cares for our own citizens first. My administration is fighting with everyone and all our heart to reverse the pain inflicted by Democrat leaders and to deliver hope and opportunity and prosperity for all Americans, but for African American communities all throughout our land.
And this is why they hate blacks in America so much, the white power structure. We're the only non-white people in the country who cannot be sent home. Right. You cannot be deported. Slavery destroyed your cultural, psychological, and intellectual connection to your ancestral homeland. If the Ghanaian get on your nerve, he go back to Ghana. If the Puerto Rican gets on your nerves, he go back to Puerto Rico. If the Afro-Cuban gets on your nerves, he or she go back to Cuba, right? If the Chinese get on your nerves, send them back to China. If the East Indian gets on your nerves, send them back to India. If the Arab gets on your nerve, send them back to one of the Middle Eastern states. But when American Africans get on your nerves, where do you deport us to? You can't deport us. Slavery destroyed that connection that they needed in order to remove us. So you cannot deport them because this is what they identify with most. So in other words, the white man created his own problem, which makes it almost impossible to deport us. So the only way to get rid of us is a systemic system of racial genocide, and that's what they're using.
We're Black Americans. We have been here since the founding of the country. That matters, does it not? Does it matter that our parents, our ancestors were here since the founding, since the 1600s, since the 1700s? Is that relevant? Is that significant? Yes, I think it is. Well, I mean, my ancestors didn't slave and sweat and, you know, toil and all that hard work that they did for Joanne Reed to have a job. She's from the Congo. They worked for Black Americans to have jobs. They did all that for Black Americans, not people from the Congo who are first-generation Americans. Not even Kamala Harris, who's Indian American and Jamaican.
Right.
My ancestors didn't work for Kamala Harris to have these benefits. They worked for Black Americans to have benefits. I think even Obama is not even a Black American. This is why using color, the skin color, is not sufficient. It's American experience. It's confusing. Right. And this is why I say white Americans and Black Americans have been in America the longest since its founding. And that is significant. That matters. That history matters. And so this is why, you know, and I don't know why so many, and, you know, I want to get into this issue about Black women, Black American women supporting. I know it's nonprofit, but Black American women don't understand most of them, some do, but most of them don't understand. They think everything is about skin color. And that's a superficial analysis of the situation. They're not looking at the history. They don't know the history. And they're just so wedded to the political left position, embracing all of their policies. And their policies have been detrimental to Black America. They need to get away from that embrace of all these policies that are the detriment. So what I'm thinking, they're not doing their homework. They're not reading this cast your bucket where you are. Cast down your bucket where they're not reading this history. They're being superficial. They're just watching the television and going along with what the politicians.
We had to fight for Juneteenth to be a holiday. Now we have to fight for it to be about African American people. And the wild thing to me is that a bunch of y'all didn't even care until a couple of years ago. I would never make Jamaican Independence Day about me, so I just personally don't understand why so many non-African American people want to make Juneteenth about them. Frankly, right now, I don't care if your people were enslaved. Okay, y'all can have your own holiday, and I will celebrate that for you. But why can't you celebrate a day for us? Especially people who live in Texas. Me personally, I would not make Jamaican Independence Day about me, okay? I wouldn't go to a Jamaican function and be like, oh, y'all need to play ABCD African-American music because, no, that's weird. I'm sorry, we need to be real about that. Why do you want it to be all about you on a day when it's not about you? Isn't that not crazy? Non-African-American Black people like to do this thing where they're like, oh, African-Americans don't have a culture. And here is the active evidence that we do have a culture, a cultural thing, and y'all are just trying to take it away like it's for all Black people. No. A lot of y'all even hate to be considered an African-American, yet who y'all are trying to overtake an African-American holiday. I'm sorry, that's crazy to me. It's crazy. There is absolutely no issue with African-American people wanting to have a day for themselves when everybody else gets a day for themselves. What? Why do y'all get it but we can't? There is no issue with non-AA people going to the function, but then getting mad because it's not playing insert Caribbean music or insert African music. That is crazy. We literally can't have anything.
The woman in this video is going to be exhibit A of why delineation has happened with FBAs. But let's go ahead and talk about this because, you know, to come into America and be disrespectful to FBAs is just some interesting work.
True Black Africans and African Americans do not claim Black Americans. We are not the same. African tends to focus on progress, family values, and community upliftment, rather than dwelling on historical grievances. They prioritize education and hard work. They don't live life blaming the white man.
As an African living in the United States, I used to share the same sentiment that Africans share about African Americans because I had a hard time when I first moved here. People used to always tell me, you're not Black enough, you're an Oreo, you're secretly white on the inside, as if I wasn't literally from Africa. But I now understand after living here for 8 years that Black in the United States is a very specific criteria and anything outside of that just doesn't fit. But I want to help African Americans understand that Africans coming to the United States are immigrants, first and foremost. Then they are Nigerian or Senegalese or whatever country they're from. And then at some point, they are Black. But Africans don't put Black high up on their identity well as much as African Americans do. And that is for legitimate reasons on both ends. And so when an African is coming to the United States, they're thinking to themselves, okay, I'm an immigrant here. I have to do my best for myself and my family back home. The sacrifices that took for me to get here were no light work. Okay, so I need to really ally myself with what's going to make me successful in this country. And because it's the United States, it's the dominant culture, which is white American culture. And so Africans are going to instinctively ally themselves with the culture that's going to give them the most success. I mean, African Americans even admit that they have to code switch to be successful here because that's what brings success. And so Africans are like, all right, we'll do that. And it also doesn't help that for a long time, Africans are fed a very negative view of Black American culture, and that's its own propaganda. But because Africans are so conservative and they're coming to a country where Black Americans have been labeled as the antithesis to this conservative traditional family values, they have, if anything, more in common with Southern Baptist white racist people. But that aside, going back to identity markers, Black Americans put Black first and foremost, and then everything else goes below it. And so they're thinking when another Black people come to our country, they're going to want to integrate with us, the other Black people, because Black comes first. And they get quickly disappointed in realizing that for Africans, Black and the identity and that coming is not first. Their immigrant identity comes first and then their country. And if anything, for us as Africans to feel like that's my brother, that's my brethren or whatever, you have to come from the same tribe as us because we have so many Black people around, we don't automatically pre-select for Black. But Black Americans don't have so many Black people around, have had to defend and protect their culture amidst a dominant white culture, and so they already pre-select and are overprotective for Black. And so that's why I think at the core of it, there's a deep misunderstanding because of not realizing that we put where we put our identity markers and what we put first and what we prioritize are so different culturally because of our differences in trauma, realistically. And so it does make sense that Black Americans will be like, oh, my people, my brethren, come here. And Africans coming to the United States are like, I'm just trying to make it here. It's a lot of work to immigrate to the United States. And so y'all can stay over there, and I can see why it's hurtful, and I can see why it's taken personally, and I can see the deep misunderstanding and the betrayal that African Americans feel. But it's unfortunate, and that's just a reality. But if we can talk about it from this perspective, I think we can get to a better understanding. But I also believe that Africans that spend enough time in the United States get to this compassion and understanding of the Black American community, because it is a very unique and specific set of circumstances for a culture to grow and to develop.
It's internationally. So the CIA is outside of America, FBI is inside of America. If you're a Pan-Africanist like the Honorable Marcus Garvey, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, you're a Pan-Africanist, you're automatically going to be watched by the FBI domestically and the CIA internationally. And I think the Diaspora Wars plays right into the hand of America's foreign policy initiatives. There was a security memorandum that came out, I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s, where the U.S. government, in a private security memorandum that has now been published now, said the greatest threat to American foreign interests is what? The operational unity of Africans in America and Africans in Africa. This is the government. Our biggest threat is if we let the Blacks on that side of the Atlantic Ocean organize.
This is a memo? This is a memo?
Oh, it's a memo. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I could probably get you the numbers. It's not on the top of my head right now. Absolutely.
Right.
Some people have even published it in books. It's definitely on the internet. People have referred to it. So they basically said, in essence, Pan-Africanism is our only problem. They don't care about nothing else. People pushing religions, people pushing socialism. They don't care about that. Pan-Africanism is the only threat to white supremacy.
So
that's crazy.
So what would you say about, obviously when we talk about the diaspora war, there's a sense of, African people or Caribbean people using the word, well, I'm not Black, you know what I mean? I'm Caribbean or I'm African or whatever the case is. And they kind of associate negativity or negative stereotypes with Black Americans per se. And they feel like they don't want to identify as Black because Black usually is the term that Black Americans call themselves. So I don't want to be identified as Black, so I am Caribbean. It's like they're separate people over there. You know what I mean? So what's your thoughts on that whole, that divide and just that whole blatant negative stereotype that some Africans or Caribbeans or other Black people feel towards Black Americans?
Well, the white man's original tactic of divide and conquer, separate and rule is still his most cherished weapon against African people. You see, understandably, when people look at America up until now being, quote unquote, the most powerful country in the world, if you want to get down with the most powerful country in the world, you're going to have to despise who they despise. And since America has done such a great job despising African people, anybody who wants to come to this country, even if they are African, are going to seek somebody else's company other than ours, right? That doesn't make what they do right. But we have to look at the fact that we as African people in America haven't done a whole lot collectively to make ourselves the power base we should be for all African people. With our education, with our income, being the richest group of African people in the world in terms of take-home pay, we should be the power base for African people throughout the world. Y'all need institutions, we're going to fund them. Y'all have a problem with your water, we're going to fund that. You understand me? You got a medical crisis, we're going to take care of that. We have the resources, we got the personnel, we got the expertise, we got the money. We should be the power base. So when an African comes to America from outside of this country, they say, well, wait a minute now. If I align myself with the African American, what is in that for me? Because I don't even see the African American doing anything for themselves on a collective basis. We have success, but it's all individual, right? There's very few institutions that we run and control independently. Let's take it to Little League. When you go for the Little League football team or the basketball team, do you go try out for the team that's losing every year? Or do you want to be on the championship team? Most children want to be on the championship team. So when Africans from the diaspora come to America, they see two teams, the Black team that has lost 157 straight Super Bowls since the end of slavery, right? And the white team that seem like they still winning and doing great. I want to align myself with the white team. Now, the mistake is that if you do not link up with us, your national homeland will never be free either. See, what they do to African people anywhere, they do to African people everywhere. So if you come from Nigeria, you come from Ghana, you come from Jamaica, you come from Turks and Caicos, you don't associate with African people, you go get you a snow bunny, move up on the west side, you can do all that. But understand, your life is only as sacred as white people allow it to be. At any minute, they can turn you into a Breonna Taylor, whether you have a U.S. passport or not.